This thing is an absolute, you know, I'll say this. Hey everybody, today we're going to be building the smallest PC I have ever built on this channel. Just so you can get an idea of how small this thing really is, I'm showing you a regular ATX size case, and then here is what we are working with today. Before we get into this, you need to know something.
I'm gay.
I bought everything here about 8 months ago, while some of these parts were way more expensive. If you wanted to build this computer today, you could definitely build it for cheaper than the total price that I will show you later in the video. I didn't even try to wait for sales, so if you're smart and patient, you could save a ton of money. So without further ado, let's get into the parts list. For the processor, we are using the Ryzen 5 1400. This CPU has 4 cores and 8 threads, with each core clocked at 3.1 gigahertz with a max turbo boost of 3.4 gigahertz. This is a pretty middle of the pack CPU in terms of performance, but it is definitely more than enough for gaming and can even handle some light streaming. I bought it new online for $150. As for the motherboard, we are using the AB350 Gaming ITX by ASRock. The two reasons I went for this specific model is because it is ITX size and fits the case, as well as being the cheapest ITX motherboard that has built-in Wi-Fi. Since this is a portable build that will be moving from place to place, it is an absolute must that this thing has built-in Wi-Fi capabilities. I purchased this online as well for $100. For the RAM, we will be using 8 gigabytes of DDR4 clocked at 3000 megahertz. These Corsair Vengeance sticks are my favorite because they are the cheapest 8 gigabyte option when it comes to finding RAM that works well with Ryzen chips. These sticks cost me another $100. The graphics card we're using is an EVGA 1060. This is the 3 gigabyte single fan variant and should be able to fit in our case. While it's not the most powerful graphics card, it is definitely a viable option and will allow us to play most games at reasonable settings. Small side note, this is actually the first graphics card I ever purchased when I upgraded the very first setup I ever had. I purchased it out of Fry's a few months before the mining apocalypse, and it cost me $190. For the drive, we will be using a 240 gigabyte SSD by SanDisk. It should go without saying, but we are using an SSD instead of a hard disk drive because we want to turn the computer on and off quite a bit faster than a hard disk drive would allow us, and we want faster boot times for all of our programs. I usually go for 128 gigabyte SSDs because they are typically quite a bit cheaper, but I was able to get a great deal on this through Craigslist for $40 locally. The power supply we're using is an ST45SF by Silverstone. We're using this one because it is a small form factor power supply, which is the only size that will fit inside the case we're using. It can output 450 watts of power, which should barely be enough to power this system. Now, SFF power supplies are actually fairly expensive because they are so rarely used in PC building. So if you're recreating this build, do not buy a cheaper ATX size power supply because it will not fit. That goes for any ITX size computer case that you buy. Check to see what size it supports because you don't want to purchase the wrong one. All that said, this power supply cost me $65. And finally for the case, we are using the PCTU 100 by Lee. When I discovered this case, I knew I had to make this video for a few reasons. There are no good videos on builds inside this case. I found one, but it's 55 minutes long and it's boring as hell. Number 2, small form factor computers are amazing. Yeah, I love giant maxed out RGB setups, but how can you not appreciate how cute this thing is?
Oh, you are so cute.
And number 3, I'm running out of content ideas, please send help. Aside from that, this case cost me $100. There is a silver one that costs $10 more, but in my opinion, it looks like absolute crap. So if we add the total cost of all of these components, this computer costs $645. Now, obviously that is a terrible price to performance ratio, but keep in mind, this build is incredibly portable. Anytime you include aspects in your build that make it more mobile, the price goes up. That same principle applies to laptops. But like I touched on before, if you are patient, look for sales, and utilize the used market, you can save a lot of money on some of the components in this build. So if you're interested in buying any of these parts, links are down below in the description. So now that we've gone over all the parts, let's get into the build. I just gotta say, I understand now why that one video was 55 minutes long. This thing is an absolute to build inside of. You know, I'll say this. If you're thinking about doing this as your first build, don't. It will ruin PC building for you. I've built probably around 30 computers now. This little briefcase is absolutely, by far, without a doubt, the hardest case I've ever built inside of, ever. So look, it's not impossible. I did it. It's just you do a lot of things out of order. You do things in ways that you don't really think to, and there are a lot of cool, unique things in here. Cable management, impossible. Anyways, I'm done complaining. Now that we have this thing done, let's turn it on and get to the benchmarks. Let me just carry it over to the testing area. So as you can see, even though this thing is tiny, it still delivers powerful performance. We were able to test almost all the games at near maxed out settings at 1080p and getting well over 60 frames per second. So what we've all learned and proved from this experience is that just because something is smaller than the average size doesn't mean you should judge it and find it less attractive than the other ones. Aside from that, I have a few more notes on this PC that you should know for anyone who is looking to recreate this build. The fan mounted on the inside front panel of the case actually gets really loud. Obviously, the size of this case, coupled with very poor ventilation and airflow, heat is going to be somewhat of an issue for this system. That said, the CPU and graphics card never reached a point while I was gaming that was so high that it should be concerning. Just know that on average, this system will run hotter than other more spacious cases. The other note is that the motherboard I used actually has a very crappy guide on how to connect the wires from the case into the motherboard. I was able to figure it out because I'm pretty experienced with building, but if it's your first time building a system, or if you're not even very experienced and are not very confident with trying to figure out the problems that come with building new systems, I would highly discourage you from taking this on. But if you can get past all that and figure this thing out, this system is actually very cool. I would say by far this is one of the most unique things that I've ever built, and I'm actually a really big fan. I think this is something that I'll be using whenever I need to travel and I need to get a little bit more powerful performance than what my laptop might be able to handle. So that's all I have to share with you guys for now. I really hope you enjoyed the build as well as the video and seeing all the benchmarks, and I hope you found it as entertaining, as informative as I did. Anyways, I just want to say I appreciate you guys so much for watching, and as always, have a great day.